Welcome to Challenge the Stats, Patreon edition. EDH Rec is built on the stats that make up the Commander format, but sometimes those stats might not represent what's best for a deck, and our patrons have some secret tech in their decks they want to share with all of you. One card that they think sees too little play for their favorite commander, and one that perhaps sees too much. This week's challenge is brought to us by Crab Baskets, one of our fiercest longtime supporters since the very beginning of the show. Crab has some secret tech to share for Roon of the Hidden Realms. Challenge the Stats is sponsored by Ultimate Guard, and for being featured in this video, we'll be sending Crab Baskets some Ultimate Guard swag, including Ultimate Guard's excellent Katana sleeves, which Joey, Matt, and I use on all our decks. Now let's get to the challenge. Crab Baskets wanted to share some tech for his Daddy Roon Lord of Flickering deck. Roon of the Hidden Realms is a Rhino Soldier of 4/4, costing 5 mana, 2 and banned, so 2 and green, white, and blue. Roon has Vigilance and Trample, and has an activated ability for 2 mana that lets you tap and exile another target creature, then return that creature to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. Crab Baskets writes, Aerial Extortionist is my favorite removal spell in the deck, and it shows up in only 72 Roon decks. Aerial Extortionist is a bird soldier, a 4/3 for 5 mana, 3 white white. It has flying, and it says whenever Aerial Extortionist enters a battlefield or deals combat damage to a player, exile up to 1 target non-land permanent. For as long as that card remains exiled, its owner may cast it. Whenever another player casts a spell from anywhere other than their hand, draw a card. Now, it was printed in the new Capenna Commander set, so it could have just flown under the radar and hasn't caught on yet. The beauty of this card is it allows you to remove non-land permanents on both ETB and on combat damage, which is great. Plus, you get card draw whenever another player casts a spell from somewhere other than their hand, and that's not just the cards exiled with Aerial Extortionist. This combination of card advantage and removal on a 4/3 body with evasion is a great rate. While it's a very good card on its own, being able to blink it with Roon and the like just makes it even more ridiculous, and it should totally see play in more than 72 Roon decks. On the flip side, Crab Baskets also wrote in about a popular card he doesn't use in his deck, Farhaven Elf. Crab writes, Farhaven Elf is showing up in 63% of all Roon decks, but we've gotten more efficient ramp attached creatures in recent years. We've gotten Prosperous Innkeeper and Gala Greeters for 2 mana that generate mana through treasures on ETB, and Farhaven Elf puts the land into play tapped, whereas Wood Elves, admittedly an old card, can get the land untapped and is more versatile than Farhaven Elf. Crab Baskets uses cards like Emiel in his deck, which can pay mana to repeatedly blink, so the mana sources coming in untapped matters a lot for these kinds of synergies. Risen Reef is another option he proposes, as it potentially draws cards or ramps and triggers on any elemental ETB, including elementals you may have blinked with Roon. Farhaven Elf is a fine card, but we've probably just got other options lately that are probably worth a look over it. So if you're building your blink strategy in a similar way, spend some extra time thinking about cards like Farhaven Elf that maybe you don't need, and Aerial Extortionist that maybe should see more play. And if you want to see even more cool tech, you can find Crab Basket's deck linked in the video description below. And if you'd like to have your deck and your secret tech featured here on Challenge the Stats Patreon edition, head over to patreon.com/EDHRecast to sign up. Thanks again for those suggestions. Thanks for supporting the show. Thanks to Ultimate Guard for sponsoring Challenge the Stats. And thank you for listening. And remember, EDH Rec your deck before you wreck your deck.